Summer of the Mariposas, Chapter 6. The hands. Give me a hand, little sister, for I don't have a brother. It was almost 10 at night by the time we finally arrived in El Sacrificio. The town was smaller than we'd expected. In fact, it wasn't really a town. El Sacrificio was no more than a few dozen houses cluttered around the country road we'd been traveling on since we turned east on Highway 57. At the Presco, a corner store, about to close down for the evening, I got out of the car and asked the elderly man who had swept the storehouse porch if he knew how to get to the dead man's house. The old man squinted and looked towards the car before he answered. He would have been better off staying gone, the old man said, pointing to the car with his chin. What? I asked. He opened the door and placed the broom against the inside wall. He has no business being here today. What does he want to do? Ruin the poor girl's day? What do you mean? I said, confused. Do you know him? Of course I do. Everyone knows each other around here, the elderly man said as he took a rag out of his apron and began to wipe down the metal domino tables folded out by the front door. He is a good for nothing, un vogo. But that's none of my business. Flour from the different sack, as far as I'm concerned. Well, do you know how to get there? I asked again, but instead of answering me, the store owner turned away and left me standing there. Then he went into the tiny depot, closed the door, and came to the window and pulled down the shade. A moment later, the porch light went out, and I stood there, wondering what I had done wrong. You're almost there, a woman's voice whispered from the darkness. I turned around and almost jumped at the sight of a female figure coming out of the shadow from behind the storehouse, like a ghost. God, you scared me, I said, holding my hand to my chest as if to stop my heart from fluttering out of it. You've come a long way, the woman whispered as she inched her way towards me, never really leaving the shadows of the porch, but getting closer and closer to me until I finally see her face. I'm proud of you, Odelia. Lolarola? I whispered her name in grateful recognition. You're almost there, she continued. Just follow the sound of the whispering moon. Listen to the sights. It's a small pink house. You can't miss it tonight. Wait, I said, as she started to drift back into the shadows. Is this part of your destiny to watch us over us, to help us when we need you? I'll be watching you as you deliver him, and afterwards too, Lola Rhoda said. But I cannot interfere with your journey. There are rules that must be followed, and I will not be able to break them. There are only so much I will be able to do. The rest is up to you. You must face your own fears and fight your own battles as you go along. That's why I gave you that ear pendant. Fight my own battles? I asked, what are you talking about? I'd battled too much with my sisters on this trip already. I was ready for some peace. I've said too much. It's not for me to explain, Lolarola whispered. She turned away and disappeared into the darkness, leaving me alone with her cryptic message. But I didn't have time to decipher their meaning. I had to get out of the night air. El Manara can kill you if you linger here too long. So I turned away from the Pasco, got into my car, and drove on, trying to finish what we started this morning. As we left the cluster of houses behind, I looked up at the moon and tried listening to her sighs. I wasn't sure it was the moon or the sigh, but I could hear something, a whisper of music, a whisper of song. What's going on? Juanita asked when I stopped the car and poked my head out the window, trying to hear the soft sound were coming from. I held my hand up with a palm out, signaling Juanita to stop talking. Shh, listen, I said. It's coming from over there. Lola Rhoda had been right. There was no way of missing the pink house, not with the party going on in the front yard. A small Mar- Marciata band was playing in the background, and people were either dancing on the lawn or sitting on folding chairs at small tables, which had been draped with white linen and decorated with white floral arrangements. Juanita leaned over for a closer look out the window. What do you think's going on? I don't know. Some kind of fiesta? I whispered. I passed the house and inconspicuously parked next door, just in front of the neighbor's fence, away from the light strung on trees around the dead man's yard. The dimness of the light of the night hid us from the guest, and we sat quietly inside our vehicle, observing everything from the dark and safe distance. I think someone's having a wedding, Velia pointed. See, there's a bride sitting at the long table by the band. That's not a wedding dress, Juanita said. We all peered out of the car without making any attempt to get out. I don't think any of us had the courage to crash the party by delivering the dead man to it. It's not? Velia asked. No, I said, suddenly understanding. A cold chill went up my spine as I realized what was going on in the drowned man's house. There's no groom. Then why is she wearing white? Peta's voice from the back was small and innocent. Because it's her 15th birthday, I whispered. It's a concierge. Who's concierge? Peta asked. The girl in the picture, Delia whispered. The little girl in the picture, Delia asked, horrified. You mean she's not little anymore? We were all dumbfounded at the realization that the dead man's wife was not a child. We were all dumbfounded at the realization that the dead man's daughter was not a child anymore, but a young lady my own age. How could we proceed with such a difficult reality from the one we'd imagined? It was like our dreams were that. It's like our dreams were shattered. The girls looked disillusioned. I was more than shocked. I was dumbstruck. Presented with the current situation, I didn't know what to do, how to proceed. Juanita pointed to the celebration taking place in the dead man's front lawn. We have to get out of here. We can't ruin her special day, she said, shaking me out of my stopper. Shh, keep it down. We don't want to call attention to ourselves, not yet anyways. I bit my fingernails and tried to figure out the best way to handle the situation. We could leave, of course, but where would we go? What could we do that didn't involve us taking the dead man with us? We have to do something. We can't just sit here and eat our hands, Velia said, knocking my hand away from my face. She was just like Mama. She didn't believe in biting your nails, no matter what the circumstance. I don't know, I admitted. Going up to the house at this time would be more than inappropriate. It would be downright mean to ruin someone's debate. I think we should get out first, Delia said. No, we need to talk first, I said, turning around to look right at the twins as I spoke. Listen, when we go there, get in there, there's going to be a lot of questions for us, but we have to be smart and have each other's back. We just can't blurt things out anymore, like you did at the bridge. Juanita turned around in her seat and looked at Peta significantly. Yeah, we've come a long way. We can't afford to blow it now. So you guys have to follow the rules of the Consiera Hamandas. Let Ardelia and I do the talking, and don't contradict anything we say. For God's sake, don't improvise. Too much cream spoils the tacos. So just keep it simple, okay? Fine. Whatever, Belia said, flipping her hands dismissively in front of Juanita's face. Can we get out now? I really have to pee. Does someone else have to pee? I have to pee, Peta piped up, squirming around in the back seat. Stop fooling around. Can't just go up there and ask to use the restroom. They don't know us from Adams, I whispered. Their commotion was only going to draw more attention to us. But I do have to pee. Peta started rocking back and forth, like she couldn't hold it for one more second. I rolled my eyes and ignored her. Stop whining and be quiet, I said after a few seconds of further complaints. I need to think, and we should keep a low profile until I figure out what to do. Maybe we should just drive away, Delia whispered behind me. Come back later when the party's over. We can find a store. We can use the restroom. Are you kidding? Delia hissed. We're in Mexico. Those are real Mexicans in there. These people can party till dawn, not to mention the stores we've drove by had been dark, locked up like the Pesquito. And our last resort would be to go into the woods. For a single thing, the twins just wouldn't rough it. So we always rode up to the nearest gas station to use the restroom when we were swimming. Well, we can't sit here all night waiting for the party to end, Delia told the twins. I don't know about you, but Papa here is stinking up the car. Seriously, he's giving me a bad headache. I don't smell anything, I said. So to prove it, I took a deep breath. It was all I could do to not gag. The smell of the death had been festering in the afternoon heat, and now it was unbearable. So I say we find a place to park for the night. And I mean, go get a room somewhere, Velia said, reaching over the front seat and touching my shoulder as a sign of consensus. Yeah, like that's going to happen, Juanita said. Did you see the size of this place? They don't even have a gas station here. We'd have to go back out to the highway if we wanted to find a motel. She turned around to look at Velia in the back seat. And how would we move the body into the room without calling attention to ourselves? It's not like we can leave him in the car all night in the parking lot. Let's face it, going to a motel is out of the question, and nothing else is open this late. I think we're stuck sitting next to him until that party's over. It doesn't smell so bad, Peta said, pinching her nose. I think the perfume's working. I had to admit it. Juanita's right. I said, we can't get a room, not until we've delivered him. We could go back to the woods, camp out until morning, Juanita suggested, as she stifled a yawn, laid her head back, and closed her eyes. I'm not going to sleep in the woods at night. I'm not a goat, Delia retorted. Next thing you know, will be expected me to sleep in a barn with horses and hay, God knows what else. And lecheatas, you want those evil owls climbing all over you while you sleep and pecking out your eyes? Velia teased Delia in the back seat. Shut up, Delia retorted, pushing her twin's shoulder. I don't believe in that stuff. Of course you don't, Velia continued. How about vampires and werewolves? You believe in those. As if on cue, An enormous animal ran up to the car and jumped up on the driver's door. He stuck his gigantic head in through the window and barked wildly. Delia and Velia screamed. I jumped in my seat, throwing my left arm out to protect my face. The drooling, long eared beast sniffed me and then yelped and clawed his way inside through the driver's side window. I couldn't see all of him at once. That's how enormous the beast was. He had to be as big as me, but much heavier. His huge paws dug into my arms and thighs, his claws painfully cutting through my skin. He was so excited, he punched me in the stomach with a mammoth paw as he pulled the rest of his enormous body into the car. I would have doubled over in pain, except that his weight was plastering me against my seat. Get him off me! Get him off me! I screamed, but nobody could help. Juanita in the front seat was busy trying to get away from the beast. A Great Dane. In his excitement, the dog sniffed our clothes, licked our faces so frantically, you'd think the frenzied creature had 3 heads. Finally, the beast made its way over me and jumped into the back seat, which, by the time, only held the drowned man's face because fear had set the rest of my sisters into motion. They had all vacated the car long before I was free from the dog and able to open my door and crawled out. As I stumbled up to Juanita, Peter scooted over to me and clung to my waist, trying to hide behind me. We stood against the chain linked fence in front of the dead man's neighbor's house, watching the gargantuan canine panting and licking his chops and whining inside the car. He sat next to the drowned man with his enormous paws neatly propped together on the dead man's lap, his tail wagging a mile a minute. Great. So much for keeping a low profile. Now I'm going to smell like a wet diaper, Delia said, mopping over her slithered hair with the hem of a shirt. Her actions reminded me of of my own condition, and I wiped my face with my shirt sleeve. It was disgusting. Do we have any of that perfume left? I asked. Yeah, Juanita said, without looking at us. But it's in my bag next to Marmaduke's evil twin. You want to get it? Sharibas! The voice and a pitched whistle produced by the tall figure of a young man at the gate of the drowning man's house made the mammoth canine stiffen in the back seat. Go home, Cerebus, the young man commanded. Cerebus, like the 3-headed dog from Hades? Delia asked, looking at me. Well, he's right about one thing. He's got a hell of a personality, but I'm not so sure he's fierce enough for that name. I know. He's nothing more than a big, sloppy puppy, the young man said, stepping forward, as if he'd been a circus beast trained to behave like a domestic creature. The mammoth dog left the dead man's side and slipped out of our car through the opposite rear window. He came around the car and sat docilely by the young man, waiting for his reward. The young man patted his forehead and pointed up the street, saying, Go home, Cerebus. To our surprise, the dog trotted off into the darkness. Are you okay, ladies? Sir? The young man asked as he peered at the body of the drowned man sitting propped against the glass of the back window. He's fine. Juanita jumped in. The dog owner stepped up to the car and reached for the back door. What's wrong with him? He's not feeling well, Velia explained, getting between the young man and the car door just in time to prevent a catastrophe. He's dead. Tired, Delia interjected, laughing nervously and shuffling her feet around. This wasn't the time to blurt out a real reason behind our arrival at the home. It's been a long trip, I said, trying to deviate the conversation away from the drowned man. Forgive me, I'm being rude. I have not introduced myself. My name is Alfredo Prado, and I'm sorry about my Abula dog. He meant no harm. The young man said, Excuse me, but I didn't catch your name. Are you friends of Beatrice? Beatrice? Juanita asked, looking around the house. La Quincenta. She's my little sister, Alfred explained, putting his hand on his chest and bowing his head slightly as a form of introduction. I looked closely at the wide set eyes and squared jawline of the young man. He looked vaguely like the little boy in the picture in Gabrielle Petito's wallet, which weighed me down as I thought of the distressing news we were bearing. Dressed formally as he was, the black tuxedo, it was obvious that he was part of the debate court and the escort of the birthday girl's attendants, perhaps. It became very clear to me that we couldn't finish what we started that morning. Not yet. We're more like friends of the family, I started, but we've come at a bad time. We'll be back in the morning. Nonsense, the young man said, raising his arms in exaggerated welcome. A fiesta is the best time to greet friends of the family. My sister's quinceañera is turning out to be quite a reunion. We just met some cousins from Sabinas today, but you have not told me your names. We're the Gaza sisters, Juanita began. This is Ardelia. She's the oldest, and this is Delia, and that's Vilia. They're twins. This one's Peta, and I'm Juanita. Listen, can we use your restroom? We've been holding it for a while. Of course, Alfredo said, extending his arm and stepping aside so that we might pass in the front yard. You are welcome at our festivities. Tell me, how do you know our family? Well, we don't know anyone else, just him, I said, pointing at the drowned man and then looking back at the girls at the white dress. She was walking around with her mother, clinging to her arm, happily greeting the guest. A voice from the darkness spoke. Alfrana, who are you talking to? We all turned around to see an older man coming towards us. He was wearing black jeans, a nice pressed shirt, and a bejeweled bolo tie, and a cowboy hat. He was too old to be part of the deputy court. He was obviously not a cherubim or escort, but the authority in his voice made me think he was someone important. These girls just arrived. They're from your side of the family, I think. Abul, the young man's voice said, turning around to face the other men. Really? The older man said, let me see. You look like my niece from Nava, but I haven't seen you since you were a bitty thing. Is that my comrade in there? Before we could stop him, the older man was stopping over, holding onto the front door window, looking into the back seat of our car. He started to say something, and then suddenly he stopped. Well, the young man asked. Madranas, the older man whispered, still looking into the back seat of our car. Gabrielle, is that you? Gabrielle, the young man in the tuxedo asked, leaning forward to peer into the car again. It can't be. Anissa. The old man turned around and started shouting towards the house. Anissa, hi Jemaya. We stood huddled by the fence, dreading the inevitable, as we watched both the concierge and her mother freeze in their tracks. The music stopped. Both mother and daughter turned around to look at the old man as he yelled, Inez, my daughter. Listen to me, Maja. Gabrielle is home. Inez, your husband is home. As if it was a B-rated movie, time seemed to stand still. I froze, unable to think. How could I warn them without making it worse? To my horror, everyone stopped talking and looked at the mother of the birthday girl. She stood rigidly, holding her daughter's shoulder with both hands, as if to stop herself from fainting. Then, suddenly, slowly, Indias Prado, the wife of Gabriel Prado, the mother of the two children, walked quietly past men, women, and children, as if she were in a trance. She made her way towards our dusty old car, with her daughter trailing behind her. The old man's head held out the arms to her. Anise went into them instantly. Alfredos, the young man in the tuxedo, took the birthday girl in his arms. They all stood looking expectantly at the car door, as if waiting for the past to hit him in the face when it opened. The guests, who all left their tables and chairs to follow Ines and her daughter out to the car, crowded behind the fence, quietly waiting in the night drama to come to a head. Is it really him? Inez asked, her voice small and faint. See, Maja, it's him. The old man held his daughter against his chest and nodded. She stuck in a breath and smoothed a whisper. No, les Maja, the old man said, stroking her hair as he begged her not to cry. Alfredo's voice quivered with emotion. Mama, is it really him? After all these years, is it really Papa? Doesn't look like him. Papa? The birthday girl whispered. No, no, he can't do this to me. Not now, not tonight. Bitte, Maja. Inez started, her voice quivering with emotions. It's just like him, isn't it, Mama? Burst continued, angry, streaking her face with tears. Just like him to ruin everything. Beatriz, por favor. Inez begged, reaching out to take her daughter into her arms. Beatrice fought off her mother's embrace. He should have stayed gone, Beatrice sobbed. I hate him, Mama. I hate him. Please make him leave. I hate him. Beatrice, Inez continued, her quivering voice. He is your father. He has a right to be here. Please don't deny him that. Inez finally gathered her daughter in her arms, visibly trembling herself now. She looked at the car again, her eyes narrowed. Why doesn't he get out? What's wrong with him? He can't, I said, forgetting my place at the fence. It's not that he can't. He won't. He's a coward. Alfonso spit out, clutching and unclenching his hands. Listen, I started. There's something you should know. I stepped towards Alfonso, but he was faster than me. Get out, you coward, Alfonso Presco screamed at his father. Then, without hesitation, he lifted the door handle and yanked the door open. No, I screamed. Don't do that, Velia and Delia finished my thought, but they were too late. To everyone's horror, the pillow cradling the drowned man's head slid down the glass, and Gabriel Patrice's body tipped over sideways, falling onto the cement sidewalk with his arms outstretched before him in full rigor mortis. The birthday girl's head fell back, and her body went limp. The crowd behind us gasped, and Peter screamed. Several of the guests moved quickly towards Beatrice, and her grandfather reached her just in time to stop her from hitting her head on the edge of the curved driveway. Alfredo helped his grandfather carry his sister into the house, with Ines and a slew of gabbing conciertos attendants following close behind them. My sisters and I waited by the fence with the rest of the guests who stood around the body, speculating about Gabriel's return. While everyone around us talked about the tragedy and asked themselves where he had been, the old man came back down the driveway and inspected the body of his daughter's estranged husband. When he was done, his face looked pale and drawn. He stood on the sidewalk and looked at us with haunting eyes. After a moment, he said, Comprehendes, please help me get my son-in-law into the house. He must be given his own measure of respect. It appears that our birthday celebration has turned into a wake. Please help me if you could, amigos. Of course, a man said as he stepped out of the crowd to help. Carlos, sir, another whispered as to help step forward. At your service, came the replies of several male guests as they stood beside Inez's father. As 6 men lifted the body of the drowned man and started to carry him towards the house, the people around us started asking questions. How do we know Gabriel? Why did we take him so long to return? Where had he been all these years? Was he involved with our mother or aunt or sister? In response to the last questions, we shook our head. But other than that, we kept our mouths shut. I was glad the girls were heeding my advice not to embellish because, at the moment, nothing we could have said would have made things better for them. Instead of talking to the guests, we walked up to the porch and stood waiting to hear from the family. They would probably have more questions for us than the guests, and it would be rude of us to leave without fulfilling them in on the little we did know. Besides, we were in a foreign country and we needed help finding a place to stay for the night. It seemed like an eternity before anyone came out of the house. In the meantime, Juanita and I sat on the old porch with Peta between us, while Delia and Vida clung to the pillars, trying their best not to wet their pants. Eventually, the old man came out of the house and spoke to everyone. Amigos, he said to the crowd, it's a very sad duty to inform you that the festivities are over. Inez and I have some delicate business to attend. Gabriel's body must be prepared for burial. You may return in the morning for the veillée, the viewing which we will hold here. Please feel free to take home as much of the food as you like. You're welcome to it. Then he turned around and spoke to the Martianes band on the other side of the yard. Senor Manucas, thank you for your service. You are free to go. Senoritas, he said, turning to address us, if you follow me, my Inez would like to speak to you. The body of Gabriel Pérez was laid out in fuel viol at the top of the dinner table, surrounded by a soft glow of dozens of gloomy candles. We peered at it as we were escorted into the house. Inez Pérez was sitting up primarily in the edge of the cushioned chair in the parlor area directly across from the dining room, next to the old woman who looked a lot like her. Inez's hands were clasped in front of her, clutching a rosary. She had taken her pink party dress off and now was wearing a modest black sheath that covered most of her body except her forearms, hands, and ankles. She looked prettier in the party dress. I'm sorry, we haven't been properly introduced, Inez said as she extended a hand to us. I'm Inez Pérez. This is my mother, Zagoras. We all shook hands. Glad to meet you, I whispered as we sat down before the two women. If we'd known about the conciertos, we would have waited. We're so sorry, Velia began, but Inez waved the apology away as she pressed the embroidered handkerchief against the corner of her eyes and looked away. Where has he been? She asked when she was composed enough to manage the words. We don't know, I said. He was already dead when we found him, floating in the river, Delia interjected. It was only a few minutes to tell Inez everything we knew. After she heard the extent of our stories, she sat quietly, blinking away tears, a lifetime of pain running down her pretty face. He sent a letter, she finally said in a low voice and deep with emotion, many years ago, saying he wouldn't be back. I'm so sorry, I said. We didn't know. I sent him a letter too, begging him to come home. For his children's sake, they missed him so much, but he never wrote back. For a while, I thought maybe he had married again, like so many men do when they go up north, Inez whispered, looking down at her hands as she spoke, as if the memory of it was too painful to speak in a normal voice. Then the authorities came. They said they found the remains of a body in a vehicle in the Chichinona Desert. They thought it might be him, but they couldn't be certain. The car was registered in his name, and there were other signs, a gun and 2 rifles he had bought several months before, which were in the trunk. I don't know who that man was, but it never felt right. They declared Gabrielle legally dead when they couldn't identify the body. At least now you know he is gone for sure, Majla. Inez, Inez's father said as he stepped into the room. Gabrielle was never really here, Inez continued in her trance like voice. He was always roaming, always wandering. I think some men are just meant for the road. They have no sense of place or belonging, no concept of family. Anyway, he's home now, finally. And I thank you for that. I'm sorry we ruined your daughter's special day, Juanita said, hanging her head and looking down at her hands. Don't be sorry, Anissa said, patting Juanita's hands. You have brought peace to my house. Peace. Exactly what we had hoped to bring. Her words confirmed it, but her face denied it, and we could see it. She was miserable.